Part 76. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 751. Chapter 751 Mutation. Tianyan has reached an agreement on taking over as the Lord God, and decided to take over in 1 month. He will just make preparations within this month. Ming Qi then looked at Yuan and said, "Wire's succession is simple. Just wait for great-grandfather to take you to pay homage to the founder of our Tiandao sect, and then recognize the master's seal. In addition, there are not many things in the sect, so I will hand them over as well with you. There are not many things or people in the section. This can only be explained in a few sentences. The most important thing is to see the ancestor. This is what everyone who takes over as the leader of the Tiandao sect must do." Yuan nodded. She had no objection to such a method of handling the situation. As a goddess in the realm of gods, it was far-fetched for her to take over the position of the sect leader. If she did it in such a grand way as her father did, it would definitely arouse all kinds of dissatisfaction from everyone, and it would be a big embarrassment at that time. If you ask Wen Do to fight with force, she won't be able to fight half the time. Anyway, she likes making a lot of money in a muffled voice, and she also likes being the leader of a sect in a muffled voice. It's not about the form. Then you all go down. The palaces you lived in before are still there. Grandpa will take Wei-er to the ancestral palace, Ming Qi said to Tianyan. Ming Xiao and Tianyan nodded, and the three of them got up and flew out of the palace. "Let's go, great-grandfather will take you there." After the three of them left, Ming Qi waved his hand and took Yuan with him before disappearing into the fusion hall. When he landed again, he was already in front of another hall. This palace is much grander than the floating and sinking palace, and the whole palace is shining with golden light, looking sacred and solemn. The plaque on the palace gate reads "The Hall of the First Ancestor." The statue of the founder of the Tiandao sect is enshrined here. Every head of the Tiandao sect will come to pay homage to her after receiving her approval. He will be the leader of the Tiandao section, Ming Qi said leisurely as he looked at the main hall. When Yuan looked at the main hall, an unspeakable emotion arose in her heart. She felt very strange, so she asked, "Grandpa Zheng, is the founder of the Tiandao sect the ancestor of our Ming family?" Ming Qi nodded. "Yes, and she is also a female ancestor." "Female ancestor?" Yuan frowned, and her heart skipped a beat when she heard that the founder of Tiandao sect was a female ancestor. "Yes, it's the female ancestor." "Why, has Wei-er heard of it?" Ming Qi asked in surprise. He saw that Yuan's face was not very good. Yuan asked again, "Great-grandfather, the first ancestor is also a star?" She just had a feeling that she couldn't explain, it was just weird. "That's not the case, what did Wei-er think of?" Yuan took a deep breath and said, "No, I just suddenly thought of Tianya chasing me. My great-grandfather should know why Tianya chased me, right?" Ming Qi was stunned for a moment, then nodded. How come he didn't know about this? Wei-er escaped from death several times, but he was actually the one who helped her behind the scenes. Ming Qi's eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you mean by Wei-er?" Yuan waved her hand. "It's hard to say. I just came here and suddenly felt a bad feeling. So I asked if it was what I was thinking. We still have to go in and take a look." Ming Qi was a little hesitant when he heard it. The feeling of a cultivator is the most accurate. Although what Yuan just said is a bit unbelievable, he believes that Yuan will not talk nonsense. Since the establishment of Tiandao sect many years ago, there has never been any incident of the founder seizing the body. Ming Qi was beating gongs and drums in his heart at the moment. Although there had been no seizures, every head of the Tiandao sect was male. Wei-er is the only woman. Thinking of this, Ming Qi also thought in his heart that in fact, the person who takes over as the head of Tiandao sect only needs to recognize the master's seal, and does not necessarily have to come to pay homage to the ancestor. Meeting the ancestor is a kind of respect. "Naie," Let's not go in, right? Ming-Chi said with a frown. Let's go in and have a look, maybe my feeling is wrong. Yuan insisted on going in and taking a look. Even if the ancestor wanted to take away her body, it would be impossible. This body was originally taken away from her. Even if that body no longer existed, this was her original body, but her soul, it's true that he took away his previous body. There are unwritten rules in the world of cultivation. Everyone knows that a body that has been taken away is not allowed to be taken away again. Even in Yuan's situation, it can be regarded as being born from a taken away body. Therefore, it was simply impossible for the ancestor to seize her. It just so happened that she also wanted to verify whether it was what she thought. Well, Wire, be careful, great-grandfather will be watching. Yuan nodded, feeling warm in her heart. Her great-grandfather really felt sorry for her. Ming-Chi said, and he performed a hand fight on the ancestral hall. When a divine light hit the door of the hall, the door immediately opened slowly. The two of them entered slowly. The main hall is very large. In the center of the main hall, there is a 6-foot-tall statue sitting cross-legged on the altar. The statue is lifelike, like a living goddess sitting cross-legged and meditating. Yuan looked towards the statue. When she saw the face of the statue, her heart skipped a beat, and that feeling came back. The statue clearly had its eyes closed, as if she were looking at her with her eyes open. Yuan frowned. There must be a soul in this statue, otherwise she wouldn't feel like she was being watched. She immediately opened her divine eyes and looked at the statue. Just looking at it with the divine eyes, the inside of the statue was blurry and blocked by something, so I couldn't see what was inside. Yuan's heart sank. This was a barrier, so she couldn't see inside the statue. She looked at Minky, who was also checking with his spiritual sense at this moment. No one had ever looked at the statue of the gods before, and they did not dare to do so, thinking that it was a blasphemy against the ancestors. These days are different from the past. He does not allow anything to harm his great-granddaughter, not even the real ancestor. At this time, inside the statue, as Yuan thought, there was a vague soul, looking at Yuan carefully. That expression, if you look closely, you can vaguely tell that it looks the same as the statue of the god. At this time, the spirit is looking at Yuan, as if looking at her prey, and nodding with satisfaction. She also turned her head and glanced at Ming-Chi, who was checking her with his spiritual consciousness. She looked unhappy. With a wave of her hand, Ming-Chi suddenly disappeared into the hall. Then the door of the hall slammed shut, and a barrier immediately surrounded the hall. Shrouded. Yuan was not panicked at all when she saw this scene, but Minky, who was sent out of the hall, felt overwhelmed and panicked at the moment. What Wire said is true. Ming-Chi was like an ant on a hot pot. He was so frightened that he didn't know what to do. He stood at the door of the hall in panic, his mind racing with confusion. Where was his Minky's great niece? How could she let that old monster get her hands on her? Ming-Chi Wuming became angry, so he clapped his hands, and two extremely powerful divine powers hit the main hall. Boom! There were two muffled sounds, and the two divine powers hit the barrier, as if they were being swallowed up. They made two fart-like sounds, and then nothing happened. Ming-Chi was stunned. His attack was so powerful, but it did no harm to the barrier. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 752. Chapter 752 Pearl. Ming-Chi refused to give up and used his divine power to attack the main hall for free, but the barrier was unbreakable and there was no reaction at all when he hit it. He had used up all his divine power, but to no avail. The barrier did not move at all. He slumped at the door of the hall in despair. After a moment, Ming-Chi took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down to see how to deal with this matter. First of all, it is definitely impossible to go to the sacred place to invite those ancestors. Those ancestors are all injured and cannot help him. Furthermore, the founder of the Tiandeo sect is also their ancestor, and they are also disciples of the Tiandeo section. It is impossible for them to offend the ancestor. Especially Shang Yuan, he is the first generation disciple. If he knew that he was coming to destroy this place, he would probably be the first one to shoot him to death, even if he was a descendant of the ancestor. He is the most protective of the ancestors. Moreover, no one believed him when he told the story. They could only say that he brought it upon himself. They couldn't even tell Tian Yan. There was no point in not telling them even after they came. After learning about this, they were afraid they would go crazy and blame him. Ming Qi thought about it and couldn't find any good solution. He could only sit outside the hall resignedly and hope that Yuan would be fine. At this time, in the main hall, Yuan stood calmly in the center of the main hall, looking at the statue with a half smile. Suddenly, golden light flashed, and a divine soul floated out from the statue. Yuan saw that the soul was very vague, but she could vaguely see that it had the same appearance as the statue of a god. Needless to say, this soul was the ancestor. Aren't you afraid? Shenhun is the ancestral pearl of Tiandeo sect. Yuan smiled softly. Why should I be afraid? You are the one who is afraid. I hope you can hold on. After enduring it for so many years, you will be exposed all of a sudden, and your work will be in vain. Haha, you have the guts. The descendants of this ancestor are indeed extraordinary. Mingzi circled around Yuan and looked at him carefully. She was very satisfied with this body. It was still the astral body, which surprised her so much. Yuan was still smiling. I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint my ancestor. How do you say this? Didn't the ancestor realize that my body was also acquired from a dead body? Yuan said lightly, her expression as if she was saying that today's weather is very good, suitable for a spring outing, so indifferent. Mingzi was stunned by this expression of shame, and she immediately used her spiritual sense to check. Sure enough, even though Yuan had taken off her mortal body and turned into a divine body, she could still tell that this body was obtained from a dead body. Moreover, it is done after reincarnation. The life of this younger generation is really great. People with such great luck are rare in the world. How could this be? Mingzi was extremely disappointed. If she wanted to take Yuan's body by force, both of them would be destroyed. She has been waiting for so many years for a star body, but it is a body that has been taken away from her. Mingzi is so disappointed. Why did the ancestor want to seize the body? Isn't it possible to rebuild it? Yuan looked at Mingzi with a downcast expression, and her soul was a little unstable. The 10,000 Buddhas were also rebuilt in her space, and Grandpa Mingxiao was also rebuilt. Why wasn't Mingzi hiding in the statue? She couldn't figure out how to seize the house. The pearl floated to the opposite side of Yuan and crossed her legs. Looking at her, the junior said, it is so easy to rebuild. I also want to do it again, but I can't get out of this palace. Where can I find the soul if I can't get out of this palace? Pulse. Hey, ancestor, you still have something to do. Yuan raised her lips and said, then you can ask everyone who takes over as the head of Tiandeo sect to help you find the soul stone. Mingzi curled her lips. Do you think I am so stupid that I don't know how to use this method? Do you know why I am in my statue? Yuan shook her head. How could she know? She wanted to know. Hey. Forget it, it's useless to tell a junior like you. Forget it, you should quickly recognize the master's divine book and leave quickly, otherwise the junior outside will demolish this temple. Mingzi thought and waved her hand. At this junior level, it is a waste of her time. Yuan pondered for a moment, and did not rush to take out the seal to identify the owner. Instead, she seriously thought about whether she should help this ancestor. Looking at her like this, she did not seem to be a despicable person. However, before helping, She had to ask clearly what was going on and then make a plan, so she asked, "Old ancestor, can you tell me why? Maybe I can help you." Mingzu glanced at her. "A little god, help her? Do you think too highly of yourself?" Yuan also rolled her eyes at her, looking down on her so much. She took out the seal of the leader of the Tiandao sect and said, "Since the ancestor doesn't say anything, forget it. I want to help you, but you don't need it. Just forget it." Speaking, he was ready to recognize his master. "How can you help, little god, what can you do?" Mingzu said angrily. Yuan didn't say anything. She waved her hand and 10 soul stones of different sizes appeared in her hand. "Huh? High-quality soul stones," Mingzu was surprised. She waved her hand, and the 10 soul stones in Yuan's hand floated around her. She greedily absorbed the soul power in the 10 soul stones. Yuan watched her quietly from the side, waiting for her to finish sucking the soul stone. She didn't believe that the ancestor didn't tell what was going on. 10 soul stones were nothing to Mingzu, and he quickly absorbed all 10 soul stones. "She just arrived, you are quite capable as a junior." After saying that, she slowly sat cross-legged on the ground and waved to Yuan to signal her to sit down too. Yuan smiled and the story was about to begin. She sat cross-legged opposite Mingzu and looked at her quietly. Mingzu sighed and said, "Junior is very curious that this ancestor is the ancestor of Tiandao sect, but he is also a divine soul, right?" Yuan nodded. "Does everyone in Tiandao sect know?" Mingzu shook her head. "I don't know, they all thought that my ancestor was no longer in this world and had gone to other cultivation worlds." "Then how did you fall? Is it related to other cultivation worlds?" Mingzu was surprised. This junior knew a lot. She glanced at Yuan with admiration and said, "Yes, the cultivation world was very prosperous at that time. It was probably the most prosperous period." Mingzu paused briefly, as if recalling that time. Yuan had never seen it before, so she couldn't imagine what the world of cultivation was like at that time. "At most, I just think about the treasures everywhere." Mingzu added, "My name is Mingzu. I come from a small family and am a casual cultivator. When I reached the level of the God Emperor and was not even close to the great perfection, I wanted to go to another cultivation world to practice in the hope that I could break through the great realm. I reached perfection and reached another realm, so I came to a world of cultivation called Tongxian." Yuan heard what she said. It turned out that such a powerful ancestor could not escape the word love. It turns out that Mingzu arrived in a world of cultivation called Tongxian. During her training, she met a male who was in the same realm as her. The two had a good impression of each other and started training together. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 753. Chapter 753 The Oath of the Inner Demon. Years later, Mingzu was impressed by this man's charm, and they got together naturally and gave birth to a boy. So Mingzu took her family of 3 back to Tianxia realm and established a sect. When he was living a very happy life, suddenly a goddess came one day and claimed to be the man's Taoist companion. Mingzu was blinded at that time, so she questioned the man, but the man naturally would not admit it, so the 2 women started fighting on the spot. In the end, Mingzu lost so miserably that her soul almost disappeared. The man forcibly broke through the barrier of the goddess and rescued the pearl. At the same time, the 2 of them fought again, and the goddess won in the end. The goddess threatened Mingzu's life and asked the man to return to the Xian realm with her. Men do it as a last resort. So the goddess imprisoned Mingzu's soul in the temple of the ancestor, never to come out. When the man left, he left his son behind and told him that he must keep the Tiandao sect no matter what, and that there should be no reason to disband the Tiandao sect. Of course the man did not tell his son that Mingzu's soul was imprisoned in the temple of the ancestor. In fact, no one in the Tiandao sect knew that she was imprisoned in the ancestral palace, and they all thought that she had gone to the Tongxian realm with a man. Then why do Grandpa and the others all have the ancestor's surname Ming, but not the male ancestor's surname? Yuan asked curiously. Mingzu sighed and said, "Our son has always had my last name. It was his request. I think he was wary of that woman at that time." "Oh, then it was also proposed by the male ancestor to return to Tianxia realm, right? The male ancestor is a bit of a scumbag. He has a Taoist companion and still looks for Mingzu. Even after the child is born, he still doesn't tell her the truth and lets others come and beat them. It can be seen from this that the male ancestor's Taoist companion should be a woman with a domineering personality and strong cultivation, so the male ancestor would be so afraid of her. None of the children born after him dared to bear his surname, and the surname was Ming." Mingzu nodded, "I haven't finished speaking yet. Later, after my son gave birth to my grandson, and then the grandson grew up, the couple also went to Tongxian realm to look for us. There was no news after this trip. I don't know. They live or die. So, ancestor, you want to take the body and get out, since you are imprisoned here. Ancestor, didn't you think that you can get out after taking the body?" Yuan poured a ladle of cold water on her without hesitation. It was her soul that was imprisoning her, not her body. Even if her body was taken away, she still couldn't get out. This ancestor was really ill and went to the doctor indiscriminately, and never thought about how the goddess would give her a chance to get out. Mingzu was startled. She really had not thought about this problem. Now that she thought about it carefully, her soul trembled violently. That woman is so cruel. It's not cruel, it's precautionary. Listening to what you said, although the male ancestor did not admit that the goddess was his Taoist companion, there are various signs that the goddess was his Taoist companion and a mother. Tiger Taoist companion, the male ancestor will avoid her. Ancestor, do you think the junior is right? Yuan rolled his eyes at her. She had already been merciful to her. Although it was not her fault, everything was caused by the male ancestor. If this kind of thing happened to Mujukan, she would not be merciful and just crush them to ashes. Yuan was so kind to help her analyze it, but he didn't want her to continue to be confused. If there is a chance to meet her again in the future, this stupid ancestor thought that they would not kill her to death. Didn't she know that the male ancestor asked for her life? Forget it, now that she knows the whole story, Yuan wants to help her, help this silly ancestor. She is the ancestor of their Ming family, but she is also a poor silly woman. After listening to Yuan's words, Mingzu immediately became discouraged. Yes, now that I think about it carefully, it should be as the junior said, it was the ancestor who was impulsive. The junior said that he could help the ancestor. Junior, tell me how you can help the ancestor? But explain it in advance, I can't afford the remuneration. At that time, my ancestor only had a ray of soul left. If I want to repay, I have to wait until the ancestor's building is restored. After hearing what she said, Yuan thought that this ancestor was not only stupid, but also so simple-minded. He did not force her to help because she was an ancestor, and he was thinking about how to repay her. Except for wanting to take her away from her before, this Mingzu still has a good character. It's just that she trusted an unworthy person, which is why she harmed herself. Yuan, the junior helping the ancestor is voluntary, and there is no need to repay, but the ancestor must swear an oath in his heart. The junior will help the ancestor, and he shall not harm my life for any reason or by any means, or rob the junior's things. During the recovery period, everything is left to the junior. After swearing the inner demon oath, the junior will take you out of here immediately and let you recover from your injuries as soon as possible. Yuan could understand Mingzu's mood. Although she did something like a saint in this matter, not killing her and helping her, but she was not stupid, and precautions were necessary, otherwise she would not help her. Really, Mingzu couldn't believe what Yuan said. Is this Junior's request so simple? Yuan nodded, it's that simple. She doesn't need any repayment. She already has a lot of treasures. She may not appreciate the pearls given to her. She didn't want to see Mingzu kill her to seize the treasure after knowing her secret. She is not Mr. Dongguo. Mingzu felt happy. If this junior could help her, how could she repay kindness with enmity? She had never been that kind of person. The thought of seizing the house before was really a last resort. She just wanted to recover as soon as possible and find the man and her son. Making an inner demonic oath is the best way, so that both of you can feel at ease. Okay, I swear, my ancestor. By the way, what's my junior's name? Ziwei, my Taoist name, Yuan said. She has been called Ziwei ever since she could remember. Maybe this is her name too. If I ask her parents another day, she should be called Chu Ziwei. Mingzu swears an oath in her heart, just use her name. Heaven only recognizes people, no matter what your name is. Mingzu nodded, then she raised her right hand and said solemnly, I, Mingzu, shall not retaliate against the goddess Ziwei. I shall not take away Ziwei's things or harm her life for any reason or by any means. Otherwise, I, Mingzu, will be deprived of my soul destroy. Yuan nodded, this inner demon oath is okay, it has binding force on Mingzu, but it has no effect on her at all. When Mingzu finished swearing the inner demon oath, Minky, who was outside, heard a thunder in the sky. He didn't know what happened inside to cause the thunder. He stood up tremblingly and approached the barrier. He was thinking, could it be that the old monster succeeded in seizing the body and that heaven was giving a warning? Ming Chi just finished shouting in his heart, and he slumped on the ground, like a puppet that had lost its life. Not long after, I saw that the aura on his body was disordered, and for a moment, he fainted at the door. Of the two people in the main hall, only Mingzu sensed the inner demon and swore an oath. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 754. Chapter 754 Can Conceal. This prohibition of the ancestral palace was engraved when they were refining it. She can control. The oath has been fulfilled. She looked at Yuan and said, Junior Ziwei, now that the oath has been fulfilled, should we go? Old ancestor, wait a moment, she still had something to finish. Well, the ancestor will be waiting. Yuan's consciousness suddenly came to her. A jade box appeared in her hand. It was the jade box containing the seal. Mingzu took a look and saw that it was the seal of the sect leader. Mingzu thought of this little girl in the realm of gods to take over as the head of the Tiandao section. Could it be that the Tiandao sect has declined? Isn't there a junior named Ming Ao before? Where is Ming Ao? He went to the battlefield outside the territory. Oh, then there is no suitable person from the Ming family to take over the Tiandao sect. Yes, my grandpa is Ming Ao's biological brother. But my grandpa didn't want to, so my great-grandfather asked me to come. Oh, then there is no one available for the Ming family's descendants. Yuan took out the seal from the jade box. This seal was only about the size of a thumb, like a small jade seal, with a dragon head on top and a square bottom, with the 4 characters Tiandaozong seal engraved on the bottom. The whole object was crystal clear, and Yuan couldn't tell what material it was made of. Just drop a drop of blood into the dragon's mouth. Mingzu looked at her, turning it over in her hand, and gave her a reminder. Okay, thank you, ancestor. Yuan immediately forced out a drop of blood essence and flew it into the dragon's mouth. As soon as the essence and blood entered the dragon's mouth instantly absorbed the essence and blood. In a moment, the thumb-sized seal slowly grew in size. At the same time, The information of the seal was also presented in Yuan Shi, Kinkan seal, the best artifact. Other than these few words, Yuan didn't know that this small seal had such a domineering name and that it was a top-notch artifact. Yuan immediately used her consciousness to control the ever-increasing Kinkan seal. She wanted to see how big the Kinkan seal could grow. Looking at such childish Yuan, Mingzu twitched and said, "Stop, stop being so curious, I will tell you how big this is. This is a top-notch artifact, an artifact that integrates offense and defense. Its body is enough, it's 100 feet big." Oh! Yuan immediately took back the Kinkan seal and put it in the space. She was in need of a top-notch artifact that integrated both offense and defense. "I will tell you how to use this Kinkan seal from now on." Mingzu glanced at her again, as if she wanted to her Kinkan seal. None of her previous artifacts were top-grade artifacts, and some were even super top-grade. It's a pity that the goddess took it away. Yuan smiled and gave a salute, "Thank you very much, ancestor." Mingzu is the ancestor, so he naturally knows how to use the Kinkan seal. Most divine weapons have their own set of magical techniques for using them, but this divine technique of the Kinkan seal has not been refined into it. Mingzu was too lazy to pay attention to her and floated in front of her, wondering if we should leave. "Then let's go." Yuan stood up and said to Mingzu. Mingzu immediately lifted the ban and asked Yuan, "Are we going to leave like this?" She would have gone out long ago if she could go out like this. Why should this junior just call her out? Yuan smiled brightly at her. "How is that possible?" "Ancestor, just relax and don't resist." Mingzu did as she was told. She was not afraid of Yuan harming her. Although she was just a soul now, her soul during her lifetime was the great perfection of the God Emperor. Now she only had 1% of her previous soul, which was even more powerful than Yuan's. If she really wanted to do anything to her, the worst possible outcome would be for both of them to perish together. Yuan didn't know what Mingzu was thinking, so her consciousness wrapped up Mingzu and immediately took her to the Soul Mountain in space, giving her a pleasant surprise first. The pearl entered the space and saw it in a place with very strong soul power. She was very surprised. This junior was indeed extraordinary. No wonder I asked her before why she didn't practice cultivation on her own and wanted to seize her body. With the soul power here, it won't take long for her to recover. At this time, Mingzu was grateful to Yuan from the bottom of her heart. Fortunately, the person she met was her. If it had been another person, it would not be the current situation. Even if she takes away someone else's body, she still can't get out and even harms a descendant. It would be hard for her to defend herself if someone discovered her. Mingzu's spiritual consciousness scanned this place. This is not only a soul mountain, it should also be in the life space. As a person from ancient times, she knew very well what kind of place this place was, otherwise Yuan wouldn't be able to take her away. After Yuan accepted the pearl, she opened the palace door and walked out. "Great-grandfather." As soon as Yuan came out, she saw Ming Qi passed out on the ground. She immediately stepped forward to help him up. With a glance of her consciousness, she realized that Ming Qi must have fainted because he was anxious and confused, causing his soul to become unstable. Moreover, the soul was still injured. Yuan had no time to think about it. His consciousness brought him to the space and directly to the Soul Mountain. "Eh? What's wrong with this junior?" Mingzu saw Yuan bringing the junior to Han Mountain, and she hurriedly floated over and asked. Yuan shook his head. "It's okay, this is my great-grandfather. He thought that I was taken away from my body. He was so anxious that he fainted because of his nervousness. He can just take care of me here." It happened to be Mingzu's company, and both of them were mentally wounded, to put it bluntly. Mingzu breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good. Why is this descendant so fragile? Didn't my ancestor not take away his body? He was almost dead, eh? His soul was injured so seriously." "What are you talking about?" my great-grandfather would have died. Yuan rolled her eyes at her. Even if her pearl dies, her great-grandfather will not die. She snatched and snatched his life back. Yes, yes, you girl, my ancestor made a slip of the tongue. Don't be angry, girl. Mingzu hurriedly said good things. This girl is so angry, she told the truth, this junior is too weak. You look at him, I'll go find something in my great-grandfather's case, he needed to be given condensing soul flower and divine soul flower first. She took a look at Mingzu and saw that she was so good at admitting her mistake, so I gave her a share. Mingzu nodded. Yuan's consciousness moved, and she went to the place where the soul flower was planted, and picked two. Then she went to the place where the soul condensing flower was, and picked the same two plants, and returned to Minky and the others. Girl, you still have such a good thing? Tisk tisk tisk, I have made a profit, so I don't believe in you in vain. Mingzu smiled broadly. Fortunately, she was in a state of trance, and Yuan could not see her scary smile. Yuan hummed at her, threw a soul flower and a concentrating flower to her, and then took out the star cauldron, preparing to practice the medicinal liquid here. Minky is in a coma and must take medicine. Yuan used the star cauldron here for her own purpose. Mingzu is from ancient times, and this star cauldron comes from the outside world of cultivation. I just don't know if she can recognize this thing. Yuan will try it first. Sure enough, when she took out the star cauldron, Mingzu noticed it. She looked at the star cauldron and said, "Isn't this the star cauldron? Why is it here with you? Do you know the ancestor?" End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 755. Chapter 755. Ming Chi wakes up. Mingzu nodded and said, "Of course I know it, and I saw it with my own eyes back then. Since the star cauldron is here with you and you are a star body, then what are you practicing, Starju?" Yuan's lips curled up. "Yes, my great-grandfather said that the skill came from outside the realm of consciousness, and it turns out it's true." Mingzu said arrogantly, "This is originally a technique to connect the mysterious world." "Of course I know it." Yuan's eyes were sly. "Does the ancestor know what the Starju and the astral body have to say?" "Explanation?" "What explanation?" Mingzu shook his head and said in confusion, "There is nothing special about Starju. The same goes for the star body. It is just a special physique that can be cultivated. I haven't heard of any difference in the others. The only thing is that you can absorb the power of stars to practice, which is nothing in our time. Have you ever heard anyone say that there is something special about the star body? No, someone just wants to take away my astral body, that's why I ask this question." Yuan finally understood that the ancestors' era belonged to the ancient times, which was the most prosperous period of cultivation. There is really nothing special about the new group. Take your astral body? What's worth taking? You'll be able to hold on until you're full, Mingzu said disdainfully. Yuan glanced at her and thought to herself, who had regretted her star body before? She asked, "Ancestor, at that time, did you have a black ice body, a red flame body, a thunder body?" Many of them were very common. Mingzu nodded, "Yes, so it's nothing special. At that time, all kinds of power were very strong, there were many kinds of divine bodies, and there were many people who practiced various powers." Yuan nodded, which meant that the star body was useless. Just like the ancestor said, it just absorbed one more kind of power for cultivation than ordinary practitioners. However, she briefly talked about the damage to the energy planet in the center of the starry sky, as well as the planets outside the territory and the battlefield outside the territory. "Ah, is this already happening outside the territory? Isn't the Tongxian world also affected?" Mingzu was surprised when she heard this, and her heart became cold again. Is the person she is looking for still there? Yuan saw that she was silent, so he refined her medicine. It's useless to ask her anything at this moment, all she has in mind is the male ancestor. Yuan sent the refined medicinal liquid to Minky's sea of consciousness, allowing his soul to swallow it. Swallow the soul condensing liquid first, and then swallow the soul condensing liquid for him after the soul has solidified a bit. After swallowing both liquids, Minky gradually woke up. Wire, Ming-Chi opened his eyes and saw Yuan. He asked carefully, for fear that the person in front of him was the old monster. Yuan smiled. Her great-grandfather really thought that she had been taken away from her, and yet she was so careful. Great-grandfather, this is Wei-er, not my ancestor. After Yuan finished speaking, she pointed to the pearl refining the concentration flower on the side. Ancestor, Ming-Chi was surprised. The soul was exactly the same as the statue. Who else could he be if he wasn't the ancestor? It's just that the ancestor didn't go outside the territory, so how could he be in a divine state? Ming-Chi was a little confused. He thought that even if there was a soul in the statue, it would not be the main soul of the ancestor but a split soul. Great-grandfather, Yuan called out softly. Ming-Chi turned around and asked Yuan with his eyes, what is going on? How could he explain it clearly in a few words? Yuan did not explain Ming-Chi's doubts. From now on, the two of them will spend a lot of time here to ask everything clearly. So she just asked, Great-grandfather, please check your soul. Do you need to heal here? Huh, Ming-Chi then looked at his soul. He remembered that when he fainted, his soul seemed to be a little unstable. When he saw his much solidified soul, he was stunned again. Not only was his soul half solidified, but half of his soul was also restored. This? Wei-er, what's going on? Ming-Chi seemed to be in an illusion. Why did it feel so unreal? Why? This great-grandfather was so surprised and happy today that he couldn't think straight. Yuan sighed and said, Great-grandfather, when we came out, I saw you fainted, and then I brought you into my space. I also saw that your soul was injured, so I used the concentrating flower and the soul flower to heal your injuries. Ah! Ming-Chi was shocked again. The concentrating flower and the soul flower were almost extinct. He remembered that Ziyuan had a soul flower in the past. Her treasure was as important as her life. He couldn't even borrow it from her to heal her injuries. Now this great-granddaughter actually used it to heal his wounds. Wire. Ming-Chi choked up a little, thinking about his great-granddaughter that he didn't help her in vain. The child didn't know it yet, but she was willing to use such a precious magic medicine on him. If she knew, he didn't know what she was going to do. But he would never say that. To put it bluntly, it was the one he should help, and it was his son and grandson who were responsible for the crime. Great-grandfather Yuan raised her hand and waved it in front of Ming-Chi's eyes. Was great-grandfather so moved? That's not the case, right? Hey, great-grandfather is so happy, so happy. Well, it's worth being happy, great-grandfather, why is your soul so injured? If she hadn't discovered it today, she would have been delayed for a long time. This is a long story. Means not to say any more. Well, you can heal your wounds here. There are Ningxuan flower and soul flower over there. You can pick them yourself and use them. Grandpa used to be so good. Good. Ming-Chi took a look at this place, and then he realized that the soul power here was so strong. Wire, you have a high-level soul vein. Ming-Chi was surprised again. Wire's chances were quite good. He has seen it, and the level of this space has exceeded his knowledge. He doesn't know what level it is. And her boundary gate. This child's luck is really hard to describe. Yuan smiled. Yes, this is a divine vein that I extracted in the God realm. Without this divine vein, the fate of many people would not be like this. Haha, I never thought that Wire would have such an opportunity to benefit from having my great-grandfather follow you. It's such a blessing. Great-grandfather has to thank you. My great-grandfather said that to Wire. Wire was even embarrassed. Yuan also looked shamelessly shy. Lucky star? As long as it's not a dim star. Ming-Chi laughed a few times. He didn't know that Yuan had such a cute side. Ha ha ha, I won't tease you anymore. I'll wait for my great-grandfather to meditate again, then take you out to hand over the hand, and then come back to retreat for healing. Well, great-grandfather, let's meditate first. Waiter will be waiting for you outside, Yuan said and glanced at the pearl that was still being refined. Mingzu's soul has become much more solidified, and her facial features can be clearly seen. She is exactly the same as the statue of the god. She is a stunning beauty. No wonder the people of their lineage have good looks. They were originally from Mingzu. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 756. Chapter 756. The Polish Commander. In front of the main hall of the Tiandao sect, Yuan and Ming-Chi stood at the door. Yuan looked at the palace that was even more magnificent than the ancestral palace. Yuan's mouth almost cramped. Should it be so high profile? A palace is still an office palace. It is even more splendid than the royal palace in the mortal world. There are 3 large gilded characters on it, Tiandaozong. How is this palace? Ming-Chi asked proudly. Yuan gave a thumbs up, domineering and arrogant. Ha 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 ha, it's really arrogant. After all, it represents the facade of our Tiandao section. We can't behave like a sect that is about to collapse. We are the #1 sect in the world. Ming-Chi was in high spirits, laughing heartily, and was in a very good mood. Yuan curled her lips. This image does not fit Mingzu's aesthetics. Could it be that the male ancestor is good at this? Great-grandfather, let's go in quickly. I have to go see grandma after everything is over. In memory, she saw it 2 or 3 times when she was very young, and the impression was not very good. At that time, my grandma had a cold temperament and was indifferent to everyone. After that, she didn't like her anymore. At that time, she did not live in Tiandao section when she was in a small world, she lived there quietly. I heard that Mingzin is the one who goes there most often, as if she is Kaiyu's biological daughter. At that time, her mother didn't think much about it at all. She thought it was normal for Mingzin to have a good relationship with her and to be close to her aunt. Now that I think about it, Thinking of Mingzin and Ziyuan, I will ask my great-grandfather later and see how he handles it. Ming-Chi nodded, waved his hand, the palace door opened, and Ming-Chi entered in a flash. Yuan also followed in. Seeing the furnishings inside, Yuan complained. This is the same as the main hall where the emperor went to court in the morning. There is still a dragon chair on top. Great-grandfather, is it the male ancestor who refined this palace? Isn't he from the dragon clan? Only people from the dragon clan like this shiny thing. Minky sat down on the futon below and said, I don't know, we have also guessed this. If Wei is curious, she can ask Mingzu ancestor. Forget it, I'm afraid of getting beaten. Yuan curled her lips and sat down opposite Ming-Chi. Ming-Chi smiled, but he didn't dare. Mingzu's ancestor had a very explosive temper. As long as her male ancestor was involved, she would be like a cat with exploded fur. She won't let you go until you're covered in bruises. Those days in space, Minky finally knew what was going on, but he didn't expect the truth to be like this. It's so surprising. From ancient times to the present, after so many years, the world of gods has changed from sea to mulberry field. The soul of the ancestor is still alive in her own statue. If Wei hadn't come, she wouldn't have discovered it. I'm afraid that the world of gods will be destroyed and no one will know about her. Ming-Chi shook his head, took out a few jade slips from the space ring, and placed them one by one in front of Yuan. These jade slips are all about Tiandao sect, you can take a look. After speaking, he took out 3 more tokens from the space and said, one of these 3 tokens is for entering the divine land, one is for entering the ancestral hall, and one is for entering the Tibetan scripture pavilion. Of course, we still have the Tibetan scripture pavilion treasure pavilion. Ming Chi brought another token with a different color and said, this is the token of the treasure pavilion. The things you want to get from the treasure pavilion are in the sex rules. Take a look for yourself. If you want to get some, you can take more treasures, but there is an ancestor watching them. You should know that the Tiandao sect has collected countless treasures over the years. Yuan nodded. From ancient times to the present, for hundreds of millions of years, if one treasure is taken in every year, then there are hundreds of millions of items. I still have to go and take a look another day, maybe I can still find treasures. Ming Chi picked up a token and said, this is from the Sutra Pavilion. You see there are 3 Sutra Pavilions next to the Tiandao section, you can read the scriptures in it yourself. Of course, you will definitely not like the internal skills and mental methods. But there is one thing that should interest you, and that is the spell book. Yuan shook her head. She was not interested in learning such crooked things, but she could take a look. What, not interested? Don't want to save your husband's family? Ming Chi looked at her curiously. I'm not interested, but you can take a look. As for the spell, didn't it have an ancestor? Now, wouldn't it be okay to ask him to solve the spell? That's not an oath of heaven. That's true, the old man is very stubborn, but with the pearl ancestor here, it's useless no matter how stubborn he is. Yuan looked at the jade slips and a few tokens on the ground and said, Grandpa, you won't hand over these few things to me, right? Where are we from the Tiandao sect? Tiandao sect is so big that apart from their family, not even a ghost is seen. Ming Chi said with a smile, how many people do you think there are in Tiandao sect? The ancestors are all retreating in the sacred land to recuperate from their injuries, and some are outside the territory. Moreover, Tiandao sect has not recruited disciples for many years. The old disciples from the past, except for your father and the 4 who are in charge of the God realm, the others have gone to the battlefield outside the territory to gain experience. Blind. Yuan was speechless. No wonder my great-grandfather only said a few words very quickly. It was indeed very fast. Her sect leader is just a bare commander, with no soldiers at all. No wonder Ming Ao was so idle in the past, that he was so idle that he came to trouble the family. Don't be discouraged. You can recruit disciples in the future to promote Tiandao section. Forget it, what kind of tricks should she teach? She has no time and is not in the mood. She might as well practice. When she reaches the level of a god, she will go to the battlefield outside the territory. Now that my great-grandfather has completed the handover, can he enter the space and go into seclusion? Ming Chi asked Yuan with a smile. Yuan said angrily, don't worry, there is one more thing that great-grandfather should take a look at. As Yuan waved her hand, the prison appeared in front of Ming Chi. Yuan waved her hand again, and Ming Xian and Ziyuan came out. Here? Why are they at your place? Ming Chi's expression changed when he saw the 2 of them. This is Ziyuan. I was still in the fairy world at that time. She took me to the divine world for no reason. If I didn't have space, I would die in her hands. Yuan sent a message. This bastard, Minky glared at Ziyuan fiercely. In the past, forgetting all the misbehavior in the divine realm, he was still kidnapping people in the lower realm. Where is she? Ming Chi took a deep breath. She, Yuan sneered, my great-grandfather doesn't know what she did, right? Ming Chi shook his head. He really didn't know the details. Great-grandfather, you don't know? Yuan was surprised. Girl, my great-grandfather said that he was in a panic. He always noticed that she was well behaved, so he didn't pay attention to her. What's more, she is still a concubine. Did you know that she and Tianya worked together and injured my parents in Zaiwei continent? She imprisoned my mother, and Tianya imprisoned my father, causing me to lose my memory. Yuan told the events of that year in detail. She also picked up some important events after she went to the Baishigod realm. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 757. Chapter 757 Ming Qi's Disposal. Ming Qi's face darkened as he listened, and by the end his face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. After Yuan finished speaking, Ming Qi couldn't bear it any longer. He struck down his palm directly on Ming Xian's body, which was really vicious. He clearly admits that he is not a good person. It can be said that there is no such thing as a good person among cultivators, and no one has touched anyone's life. But it was the first time he had seen someone so vicious. Such people are his sons, grandsons, granddaughters, and a great-grandson. It's really a long time to see you. Minky's palm hit Mingzin and knocked him away. Mingzin, who was already unconscious, flew straight out like a rubber ball and didn't fall down until it hit the door. Hearing the sound of Mingzin's bones breaking, Yuan felt so painful. It's a pity that Yuan, the sole thorn in Ming's heart, didn't stay unconscious, otherwise she would have experienced firsthand the feeling of being struck by her own grandfather's palm. It doesn't matter if you are hurt by outsiders, but if you are hurt by your own relatives, it is simply sad. Practitioners also have a heart. This beast is worse than a beast. Ming Qi was simply exposed. Each one was inferior to the other, and each one was more beast than the last. Ming Ao's litter was like a litter of beasts. The branch of Ming Ao is broken from the root of Ming Ao, and the lower part is broken all over. Ming Qi was so angry that he didn't expect that this group of people would do so many evil things under his nose. He always thought that Tianya only wanted to seize Yuan's star body in order to obtain the Starju, but he never thought that his family would do so many things that were worse than animals. Even now he knows that Ming Ao thinks he is partial to Ming Xiao, and that is why Ming Ao kills Ming Xiao. Why is he partial? The leader of the Tiandao sect does not necessarily have to be a star body, but it is better to be a star body, because he does not want the Tiandao sect's most precious treasure Starju to fall into the hands of others. To choose Ming Xiao, firstly, he is the eldest son, secondly, he has good qualifications and good moral character, and thirdly, he passed Xing Chenju to Ming Xiao because he calculated that Ming Xiao's branch would produce a star body. Besides, didn't he also practice the star art? Even if he had already practiced the star art, he took the star art back and gave it to Ming Xiao, but it wasn't like he wouldn't let him practice it. I didn't expect that to be so small-minded and do so many evil things. Him himself is not evil, but he indulges his children and even helps them. Ming Qi felt that it was too lenient to send the father and son to overseas battlefields, and they should be imprisoned. Yuan waited until Ming Qi became angry before she asked, "Great-grandfather, what should we do with these two people?" She was eager to kill these two wretched women, but after all, she was the descendant of her great-grandfather, so she left the decision-making power to him. After the province was established, some dissensions arose. Ming Qi glanced at the little fox and it was clear that he was letting him handle it. He sighed and glanced at Ziyuan and Mingzin, who looked like two balls. Throw them into the prison and let them fend for themselves there. Don't deal with it, it would be unfair to the boss's family, but deal with it. It's his granddaughter and great-granddaughter. He can't kill them yet. With their vicious temperament, they are suitable to stay in prison. Now it's better. The second brother's family is considered to be in trouble. All right. Yuan nodded and threw them into the prison again. They stayed in the prison. As long as she didn't die, they would have no chance to come out. In the end, they would all die together. She was very satisfied with this result. It seemed that he, the great-grandfather, had taken care of them clearly and would not let them out just because they were his granddaughters or great-granddaughters. They don't know what trouble they are going to cause when they come out, and they are annoyed to death. They have been evil people all their lives, and they feel uncomfortable if they don't do anything for a day. They have to do something to make them feel comfortable. And she, Yuan, is most afraid of trouble and doesn't like to deal with them every day. This outcome is the best. It was just that this great-grandfather was embarrassed. He was exterminated one after another for righteousness, and Yuan looked at him as if he had grown older in an instant. Thinking about it, if Liang Bao's grandson or son did something unforgivable in the future, she wouldn't be able to kill them all. It's really a test of human nature. Okay, Wei-er, great-grandfather has handed over the Tiandao sect to you, now the future matters are up to you. Great-grandfather should go back to retreat. Good. Looking at the lost Ming-Chi, Yuan felt a lot of unbearability in her heart. It was really difficult for this old man, but she couldn't forgive him, and she really didn't know how to comfort him, so she had to nod and receive him into the space. Yuan then looked at the jade slips on the ground. She read several jade slips one by one. One of the jade slips contained the rules of the Tiandao sect, and the other one contained the map of the entire Tiandao sect. She memorized the map, then took out the divine jade of sound transmission, and immediately sent a message to Tianyan, asking which palace they were in. On the other side, Tianyan received a message from Yuan and immediately replied to her. They were in a sun and moon temple on the edge of Tiandao sect, and their family lived in this temple. After Yuan received the message, she looked at the map and knew the specific location of the sun and moon temple, so she immediately teleported there. Outside the sun and moon temple, Yao Ji was already waiting outside with little Chu Ling in her arms. When she saw Yuan Fei coming, she immediately stepped forward. "Wire, has the matter been settled?" Yao Ji asked. "Everything is fine, let's see grandma now." "How is grandma now?" Yao Ji took a deep breath. "Since your grandmother recovered her memory, she has become even more reticent." "The relationship with your grandfather?" Yao Ji sighed when she said this and said no more. Yuan followed Yao Ji into the hall while listening, and then she asked, "Why? Didn't grandma say any reason? Or is it because he can't let go of Ming Ao?" Yao Ji shook her head. "After your grandma recovered, she locked herself in the room and saw no one. She just came out today and paid no attention to anyone. Facing your grandpa is like facing a stranger. Ming Xiao was so sad that she didn't know what happened, so she locked herself in the room alone, not even her daughter." Yuan was surprised. "That's it? Let's go see grandma first." Yaji nodded, took Yuan to the outside of Kaiyu's bedroom, stretched out her hand and knocked on the door. The door opened immediately, and the mother and daughter walked in. Kaiyu's bedroom is very simple, with a futon on the floor and a coffee table, nothing more. Kaiyu was sitting on a futon at this time. When she saw the two people coming, she placed two futons opposite the coffee table, gestured for the two of them to sit down, and closed the door with a wave of her hand. "Grandma, I'm Wei-er, do you remember?" After sitting down, Yuan immediately called Kaiyu. Just like in her previous memories, Kaiyu had not changed at all. She was still cold and indifferent to her, and she did not smile when she saw them, mother and son. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 758. Chapter 758 Grandma Kaiyu. This made Yuan wonder in her heart that Kaiyu really fell in love with Ming Ao. Otherwise, why would we be so indifferent to them? Kaiyu glanced at her lightly and nodded. Yuan smiled at her, took out the fruit from the space and put it on the table before asking, "Grandma, how have you been in these years?" Kaiyu was stunned for a moment, thinking that Yuan would ask about the past when they met, or about her memory, or about her and Ming Xiao, but she didn't expect to ask her how she was doing. Kaiyu felt a little moved, and her heart that had been cold for hundreds of thousands felt a little warm. In all these years, no one has ever asked her how she is doing or how she is. She glanced at Yao Ji and murmured a few times, but it was hard to say what she wanted to say. Yuan glanced at the mother who was eating the fruit. She was such a big-hearted woman. No wonder her grandmother didn't want to say it in front of her if she had something to say. They are all mothers, and they don't know how to care about their own mothers. It is estimated that Kaiyu was indifferent to them before because of these reasons. On the other hand, Ming Xian is a sweet-tongued person who is always good at pleasing people. She handed a fruit to Kaiyu. "Grandma, try this fruit." Kaiyu nodded, took the fruit, and ate it in small bites. Yuan took out 2 more pots of wine brewed in the space. Why did you bring out 2 jugs of wine?" Yao Ji pointed at the 2 jugs of wine and asked, "Why don't you give her a drink?" Yuan smiled, "Mom, it's better not to drink. You and my little brother go into the space." Speaking, he brought Yaji mother and son into the space in front of Kaiyu. Her mother is here, how can her grandma tell her what's in her heart, and how can she help her to resolve her knot? Yuan opened a pot of wine, took out the wine glass, served Chuyuemin, put it in front of her, and then said, "Is there something wrong with grandma that you can't tell in front of mother?" Kaiyu smelled the aroma of the wine, and the corner of her mouth twitched. She picked up the wine glass and drank it all in one gulp. She said, "You are much smarter than your mother." Yuan xiao, Chiyu just wants to talk to her. She speaks alone, and immediately becomes silent after less than 2 sentences. She doesn't know what to say. She first helped the Kaiyu Mantang, then she also picked up a glass of wine and drank it down in one gulp, saying, "Mother, you are so kind." "Grandma, have you been happy these years?" Yuan asked again. Kaiyu still didn't say anything. She took out the tea set and started to make tea. After brewing, she poured a cup and put it in front of Yuan. "How about you try grandma's craftsmanship? When you came here before, grandma didn't care about you." Yuan nodded, as courtesy should be reciprocated. She took a sip and said, "Well, grandma's tea is good." "Does grandma like to drink tea?" "When we were little, we always made trouble when we came to grandma's house. Even if grandma brewed it for us to drink, we couldn't tell what it tasted like." Kaiyu smiled calmly. "Wire can talk better than before and has matured a lot. When you were a child, you were a monkey. When you came to grandma's place, you would rummage through things. At that time, grandma liked you like this very much, hey?" Yuan only smiled and did not interrupt. She knew that Kaiyu had not finished speaking. Kaiyu paused for a moment and then said, "It's not that grandma likes or dislikes tea. It's just that she likes to pour something when she has nothing to do. You can't meditate all the time." Yuan nodded to express that she understood. Just like her, it was not that she loved something very much, but she was just looking for something new to do during the boring training days. "Is Wei getting married?" Kaiyu suddenly changed the subject. Yuan nodded. "I got married very early and gave birth to a pair of twins. The 3 of them, father and son, are now in the tower." "That's good, Wei is very happy, right?" "Certainly." Kaiyu Qian said, "Because that's the day you like, the day you want, and the person you want to marry, right?" Yuan looked at Kaiyu's bitter expression and carefully studied what she said. Yuan understood something. "Grandma, you don't love grandpa? That's why you're unhappy? You were kidnapped by Ming Ao because you actually liked Ming Ao. You were pregnant with your mother at that time, so you couldn't face such a thing, so you just pretended amnesia." Yuan was shocked by her bold guess. She didn't know why, but she suddenly thought of this question. Kaiyu chuckled twice and sipped her tea. She did not hide this from her smart granddaughter. She nodded and said, "You kid, you said you are smarter than your mother." Grandma was indeed right. Hearing what Kaiyu said, Yuan thought that indeed, she really convinced herself that she guessed it with just one guess. But it's not that she was just guessing, but that's what Kaiyu meant. She got married to someone she didn't like, and was kidnapped by someone she liked. When facing the person she liked, she thought of herself as a married woman and pregnant with a child, so she couldn't express her feelings. So just close yourself off and not face it. To outsiders, she has lost her memory. Yuan, does Grandpa know? He does not know. Yuan thought about it and then said, then you should explain it clearly to Grandpa. Grandpa is a reasonable and kind-hearted person. As long as you explain it clearly, he will not blame you. If you don't say it like this, it will make Grandpa suspicious, and he will also be sad. What makes him sad is not that you have bad thoughts about you, but that he will think that you have not been protected. Yuan knew her grandfather very well. He was really a kind-hearted man. He had always been ashamed of his grandmother, mother, and her, thinking that he had failed to protect his wife and daughter. Kaiyu and Yuan opened their hearts to talk. She felt much better and she had figured out some things. She said, well, Grandma came out just to talk to your grandpa. Grandma knows that this matter is unfair to your grandpa. Then after Grandma talks to Grandpa, what are your plans? Do you know that Grandpa has gone abroad? Yuan's meaning is very obvious, that is, after Kaiyu and Mingxiao resolve the matter, will they go outside the territory to find Mingao? Kaiyu, plan, I haven't thought about it. Let's talk about it after talking to your grandpa. It's too late to say anything else. The person who hurt her has already caused harm, will she still like the person who hurt her family? If she shamelessly pursues Mingao outside the territory, how will her daughter's family view her? She doesn't want to hurt anyone. Mingxiao is a very good man, and she doesn't want to hurt him again. But her heart just couldn't hold Mingxiao. She just likes the bad Mingao. Didn't it say that women don't love men if they are not bad? Maybe she just likes Mingao who is so bad and scoundrel-like. This is the problem she has struggled with all her life. When I became a Taoist couple with Mingxiao, I was forced by my family. There was no way around it. At that time, Mingxiao was designated as the head of Tiandao sect, so their family asked her to marry. Her family belongs to the Tiandao sect, and her grandparents are ancestors. Her parents knew that the person she liked was Mingao, but they couldn't resist her grandfather and finally compromised. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 759. Chapter 759 Persuasion. Yuan took a deep breath. Seeing her grandma like this, she felt very upset. To be honest, she hoped that her grandma had experienced these things and could live a good life with her grandpa. But emotional matters cannot be forced, so she said, okay, no matter what grandma decides, Wire will support you. She has been on Earth before, and she doesn't feel the need to force herself on emotional matters. It's really sad to live with people she doesn't love. The lifespan of a man of God is infinite. If you can't make do with something, don't make do with it. If you can make do with something, you can still make do with it reluctantly. After all, their family is now considered complete, and she doesn't want to be broken into pieces again. Is what Wire said true? If grandma leaves your grandpa, will Wire support it? Kaiyu was surprised that Yuan would say this. Yuan nodded. Of course, Wire thinks that two people must have a certain amount of affection when they are together. It's not very strong, but it must be there. Being together without any affection at all will only deepen the pain between each other. Kaiyu was very surprised that Wire understood the matter of feelings so thoroughly at such a young age. If she had said these words to Ruoer, her daughter would probably call her a shameless woman. This granddaughter is really a different kind of child. Caillou smiled. Wire has such an understanding at a young age. It seems that you don't need to go through any love tribulations. I haven't gone through any love tribulations, Yuan said with a smile. Indeed, she has never gone through any love tribulations from beginning to end. In her concept, there is no love that cannot be obtained, only love that should be loved. Since it is possible, if you don't get what you want, just let it go. It's very simple. Only by being truly free and easy can you not be trapped by love. The most difficult calamity in this world is the calamity of love, and Yuan has always seen it clearly. Perhaps this is the reason why she didn't even have inner demon tribulations when she was going through tribulations. If she can see through emotions, what else is her inner demon? Your child has a pure mind. Caillou pursed her lips. She was not as good as her granddaughter at her age. Drank another glass of wine. Wire, your wine is not bad, can you give Grandma a bottle? No problem, I'll sort it out and give it to Grandma later, it's just a gift for Grandma. Caillou nodded, hesitated for a moment and said, Wire, please wait and see your grandpa. I think he looks a little bad. Grandma, don't worry, she'll go see Grandpa later, but the person who tied the bell needs to be untied. Grandma understands. Caillou stood up and sat next to Yuan, touching her head. This child was really sensible and understanding. Yuan turned his head and smiled at her. Grandma, Wei-er has something to say to you sincerely. In fact, Wei-er has selfish motives. She just hopes that you and Grandpa will reconcile. Second, Grandpa is not suitable for you. Caillou's face changed, and she asked, why did Wire say this again? Why is your second grandpa not suitable? Yuan pursed her lips tightly. Grandma, do you want to hear the truth? Caillou nodded. Yuan said, Grandma, even if we cultivators don't have as many requirements as ordinary people in terms of relationships, we have one thing that is almost the same as ordinary people. That is, we women should find someone who loves us and loves us, instead of going to find the ones we love. Living with the people who love us is very happy, but living with the people we love is very hard. Grandma should understand what Wei-er said, right? The reason why Grandpa is not suitable for you is that he is narrow-minded and cannot tolerate people he does not like in his heart. Moreover, you and Grandpa are Taoist lovers, and you have a mother. The most important thing is that he and Grandpa are incompatible with each other, and they are sworn enemies of our family. You should understand what Wire said, right? With his proud temper, how could he want the enemy's woman? From her perspective, her grandmother had nothing to do for so many years, and Ming Ao would rather marry a concubine to have a happy life, or live a long life with a woman outside. From these, it can be seen that Ming Ao is not willing to be married to her grandmother, and she hates her very much. It's just that he never showed it. Grandma, the person involved, could not see clearly. If Ming Ao really cared about Grandma, why didn't he stay with her? To put it bluntly, Ming Ao did this, but that was not the case. It was a disgusting approach. After Caillou heard this, the little expectation in her heart instantly dropped, and she felt extremely disappointed. She thought wishfully that she was not worthy of him, so she kept acquiescing to Ming Ao's actions. Actually, it's not that she hasn't thought about these things, it's because she couldn't face Ming Ao after thinking about it. It turns out that they don't care about her past, but they don't like her at all, and they kidnapped her just to humiliate Ming Xiao. No wonder they have never been together for so many years. He would rather marry a concubine and have children with a woman outside than touch her. It turned out that she was just deceiving herself, thinking that Ming Ao also liked her, otherwise how could she be kidnapped? Thinking of this, Qiu felt disheartened. She nodded towards Yuan and said, "Thank you, Wei-er, for waking up Grandma." Before, it was just Grandma's own passion and fantasy. It's good that Grandma can figure it out. In fact, Our family is living happily, so what's wrong with it? Even if you and Grandpa start over, it will be more practical than if there is no result between you and second Grandpa. It also hurts people's hearts and lungs, so why bother? Kaiyu nodded. Yuan saw that Kaiyu really seemed to have given up, and she continued, people are afraid of hitting the wall. In fact, everyone understands this truth. They all want to find a little bit of luck, but there is no luck every time, not everyone has such good luck. She just wanted Kaiyu to give up completely, and give up the thought of looking for Ming Ao. Ming Ao is not worth what Kaiyu has to do for him. Of course, she hopes that Kaiyu is a clear-minded person. They and Ming Ao have an undying feud. They are not over yet and there is still war between them. Kaiyu reached out and touched Yuan's head again. You child, I don't know what you have gone through. You were innocent and cute before. I didn't expect that hundreds of thousands of years have passed, and Wei has transformed into such an amazing person. Yuan shook her head. Grandma, it took me several lives and deaths to realize it, but the price was too high. And Grandma should know that everything I have experienced is the work of my second Grandpa. From the bottom of your heart, Wire doesn't want Grandma to have anything to do with her second Grandpa. Their father and son have an undying feud with us. One day we will have a fight, a real fight. Either you die or I live. Yuan still told Qiuyu truthfully what was in her heart. Qiuyu opened her mouth after hearing this. She didn't expect that things had developed like this. What she thought was really too simple. Ming Ao and his son not only hurt Ruoer and Tianyan, but also hurt Wei. They are mortal enemies. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 760. Chapter 760 Persuasion 1. How could she be so naive as to think that she could still be with Ming Ao? Then how can they, mother and daughter, face her as their mother and grandmother? She is too selfish. But she was very relieved to hear Yuan's true words. She could stop the loss in time, and she already knew exactly what to do. Just like Yuan said, except Ming Xiao, they already have grandchildren, there is nothing they cannot face. Seeing her relieved look, Yuan knew that her words had an effect, and the rest was up to the two of them, so she took the opportunity to say, Grandma, Na-ie went to see Grandpa, and by the way, I can prepare what you want of wine. Go, Qiuyu said softly. Yuan nodded, shook Qiuyu's hand, then got up and walked out of the hall, and then moved out of Yaoji. Wire, how are you? What can you tell your grandma? Yaoji asked eagerly as soon as she came out. You thought Mom didn't care about Grandma, Yuan glanced at her and said, I didn't say anything. Mom can ask Grandma by herself. Mom, please take me to see Grandpa. She became a peacemaker, speaking here and persuading others. Yaoji said, it's not that she doesn't care about my mother, but she also wants me to listen to her. She nodded and said, okay. Yaoji took Yuan to another dormitory, and then knocked on the door. The door did not open, so Yaoji shouted, Dad, please open the door. It's Wei here. Just after calling, the door opened and the two women went in. The furnishings in Ming Xiao's house were roughly the same as those in Qiuyu's house. Ming Xiao sat on the futon with a sad expression. This time Yuan did not take Yaoji into the space, but moved little Chuling out and let her carry her out to find Tianyan. Yaoji knew that their ancestors and grandchildren had something to say, and she could not play any role here, so she obediently hugged her son and went out. After the mother and son went out, Yuan went to close the door, and then removed the fruit and wine in the same way. Yuan filled it with Ming Xiao and placed it in front of him. Grandpa, take a sip first to relieve your boredom. Ming Xiao sighed and looked at her, then at the small wine glass, then at the jug. He grabbed the jug without ceremony and drank the whole jug in one go. Ah, It's worse wine that relieves depression. After a bottle of wine, the depression in your stomach is gone and it's filled with wine, Ming Xiao also said with a smile. Then why is Grandpa still angry? Do you know where I come from? Where did it come from? It didn't come from your grandmother, did it? Ming Xiao looked at her. Grandpa is really good at fortune telling. Wire came from Grandma. Oh? Really? What did your grandma say? Ming Xiao asked nervously. Yuan pursed her lips and smiled. Grandpa was so nervous about Grandma, and he cared about her very much. It was a pity that he had no intention of being in love with his concubine. She'd better work hard and build a bridge between them and become a moon lady. Do you know Grandma's heart knot? Ming Xiao was startled and shook his head dejectedly. If he had known, how could he be at a loss now? He has been looking forward to it for so many years, hoping that Yu can regain her memory. They are husband and wife, they are a family, and they should live together. Unexpectedly, Kaiyu came out and treated him coldly. She had never been colder before. He didn't know why. He didn't tell her when he asked her, so he came back alone to think about things. Think about what went wrong here. Yuan sighed and asked, when you and Grandma became Taoist couples, was Grandma happy at that time? Ming Xiao thought about it. You should be happy, right? Otherwise, how could your Grandma and Grandpa be a Taoist couple? This silly Grandpa, how could he be so careless and become a Taoist couple, and he still doesn't understand his Grandma? Perhaps Grandpa thought that Grandma was like other women. As long as she married someone, she would accept it no matter who the other party was. Does Grandpa know that your becoming a Taoist couple is a marriage between two families? Ming Xiao knew this and nodded. Then you know it's a marriage between two families, but don't you know that Grandma is unwilling? She actually has someone else in her heart. Ling Xiao was stunned for a moment. Apparently he had never thought about this issue before. Can they make their own decisions about their marriage? Of course not. Even though they are all monks and born into such a family, they actually have no control over their marriage. You have to marry if your family asks you to do so. You have to be willing if you don't want to. You don't have the right to say no. As long as they are from larger families, let alone those who are born into top families. Furthermore, Wire said she already had someone in mind. Who was it? Why have I never heard from her? Ming Xiao's face suddenly became confused. Is this the reason why Kaiyu ignored him? Is this also the knot in her heart? Then why don't you say it out? Maybe you can change the marriage to someone else, since they are all destined to be married, but you can also make it clear and change it. Do you understand what's going on now? Ming Xiao nodded bitterly. His granddaughter made it so clear, but he still didn't understand that he was so stupid. He never expected that the result would be like this. He thought Kaiyu and Ming Ao had been married for more than 100,000 years, and she really fell in love with Ming Ao. Wire, do you know who your grandma liked at that time? Yuan, let Grandma tell you this. Grandpa must understand that what Wei told you is not to tell you to care about who Grandma is in your heart and to cause further estrangement between you two. It is to tell you that Grandma ignores you. Reason. If Grandpa cares about Grandma, then you should use all your strength to chase Grandma and catch her. If you care about Grandma, you should let Grandma fulfill her. Practitioners should just do it simply, because there are so many children who are constantly in love. The reason why I told Grandpa so clearly was to prepare him mentally. If he didn't understand the truth and then talked nonsense with Grandma, it would be self-defeating. At that time, Grandma will think that Grandpa cares about her, and the two of them will break up or get further apart. It is better for two people to open their hearts and talk openly. If they can get over it, they can get over it, and if they can't get over it, they can get together and part ways. There are so many couples on earth who are divorced, aren't they just living it up? As a cultivator, can't we still see through this? It does not mean that cultivators are superior to ordinary people, or that they are smarter than them in every aspect. No, it's just that cultivators have more time to settle these things. Mortal people don't have as much time as they do. They only have a few decades. If they think about everything clearly, they will live a lifetime without doing anything. A man of God cannot live in confusion. A man of God must make everything clear and clear, otherwise he will become his own inner demon when he is going through a tribulation. And the man of God has plenty of time to deal with these things. Ming Xiao fell into deep thought after hearing what Yuan said. Yuan was standing by, fearing that he might not understand and go crazy. End of this chapter.